Everyone, welcome in. We're gonna have to do an introduction real quick again. So welcome in those who were on our Discord. We had some technical difficulties. We are now on Twitch, where everything matters. And Oscom was wrong. I was right once again. For the record, guys. That's for the record. All right, guys. Today we're gonna walk through. I don't know what we're doing today. I'm kidding. So we're gonna walk through different tips and things to check out for your assets before submitting to the Sandbox collection. These are essentially just quality metrics that you need to make sure your assets have in order to cross those quality checks. So we're gonna be talking about Z fighting, animation names, clipping, node count, face count, closing out your animations, not closing out your animations for static objects, centering your pivot points, equipment names, which you shouldn't change, and then not propping your shoes up properly. So a lot of you who are in the chat already know a lot of this, but it was important for us to kind of get this documented and out to people so we can share, especially for someone that may be entering their first collection asset. And yeah, let's get started with the Z fighting. Oh man, this is so much more smoother. Love it. Okay, cool. No more Discord. I'm not doing any more Discords. All right, so this is an asset that was submitted by DM Archer. He's in part of the Creative Fund, and great asset. However, there were one or two issues that had to be addressed and fixed, and one of them was Z fighting. Now with Z fighting, everywhere in the asset was fine except this part of the asset where he had two colors kind of coming together that kind of flicker because they fight for priority on your view, right? And this is actually more visible in game as well. So when we received the asset, essentially it was, let me see, 0.1 like this. And you'll see that flicker right there, right? Oh man, this is so much better than Discord. You see that flicker right there? So right there, that is Z fighting. What's going on is the software is fighting for your attention, right? And it's saying, hey, these two nodes are two different colors, and they're basically they want to be showing off themselves, right? And you have to let the software, you have to tell the software which is more of a priority, so this Z fighting isn't happening, and you have to make sure this isn't on any of your other assets, like or your conjoining areas. There's two ways to fix this. The first way is you can select that node, and what you can simply do is just move it up by 0.001, right? Up, down, whatever. In my case, I moved it down right now. So now the gray one is up more, above, so the software knows that it's not an issue. The other way to fix this is, let's bring this back, is you may need to bring the color for this, either this to this color or this color here, the light gray into the dark gray. That way when the clipping does happen, it's not visible, right? So let's see if we can show that off real quick. So this color, I believe, is right here. All right, so I'm going to grab this color 52, and then going to jump in here, edit. Going to come to where the two colors meet. You'll see that's like right there. And then I am going to let's do this one, and there you go. So I'm just going to be coloring that part in with this color. All right. And that will kind of mess up your design. And then you'll see some new Z fighting is, right? So the Z fighting now is happening because of this region, right? So the best way to kind of do this is just, instead of changing your colors because you want to keep your design the way it is, just move up that node by 0.01 and you'll see that kind of, this is not visible in game, but you'll see that little kind of increase between the two voxels. All right. Let me know if you have any questions about it. So that is kind of Z fighting. You want to make sure where your nodes are connecting, that our different colors are not overlapping at the exact same axes. And so it's a simple position fix on the inspector. The other thing that I forgot to mention is you want to make sure this is on your animation as well. So if you have it on, let's say, 0 seconds, and then you forgot to do it on yours, whatever other minute is, let's go select it here. Then you're going to run into the same issue, but now it's going to be in animation form, right? So it's going to be like, you see that? So you want to make sure it's also on both your animation slots or keyframes. All right, so that was sort of, yeah, it is a very cool car made by DM Archer. Very nice. So animation names, these are important. So this was an asset that was, I think, built for a contest that was submitted as part of our collection. And all these are part of our collection right now that went through some fixes. The important things with the animation names, you want to make sure it has some kind of verb and a integer value, right? So it's attack 0-1, attack 0-2, and it follows that pattern, like death 0-1. So if I had another death animation, it'd be death 0-2. Don't use any underscores, or just make it proper case, which is first letter is capital for each of the words that are separate, and then you have some kind of integer starting with 0-1. And you don't want to have idle without the 0-1 on your generic NPC assets, right? It's a different case for equipments and wearables. We'll talk about that in just a second. So this would, for example, when I upload this asset, it'll trigger a flag on the, it always needs the number, yes. Ending around it always needs a 0-1, not 1 either. It has to be 0-1, 0-2, 0-3, 0-4. So you got to have that 0 up front. Okay, and a lot of the reason is because these numbers have programming value inside the game, and so attack 0-1 is looking at attack 0-1 all the time. Attack 0-2 is looking at attack 0-2 with the power up hit, and yeah. So this walk back up here is is not a good naming mechanic. First of all, it it breaks the pattern. If you already have a walk 0-1, you can do walk 0-2 if you want to keep it, or you can do walking 0-1, right, etc. But if you do walking 0-1, there might be already a pre-programmed animation name under walk 0-1 which already exists. So so the best thing to do is do walk 0-2. Right, just the naming style for this has to be proper cased, and then 0-1, 0-2. This wouldn't make sense because I don't have a walk 0-1, so I'm just going to make it walk 0-1 because having walk 0-2 wouldn't make sense without having walk 0-1. Even still animations, yes. Goodness, new walks file, we just have idle animation, but need to add 0 if any animation. Correct, but that is there is another issue with that. Idle for templates, idle has to be the default for the game to still work. That has not been addressed or fixed. So wearables, weapons, etc. need to have idle without the number. So let's take that as an example. Let's take this shoes. So when you open the shoe template actually requires 2 animations. One is the T-pose animation, and the other is the idle animation. So for this, you do not want to change the animation name to idle01. For this, it has to be idle. Same thing with the sword animation, same thing with the shield animation, same thing for all the other wearables. So if we started a wearable, let's do a chess piece, right? And test 2. You don't want to change this animation names. You want to keep these exactly the same, okay? And you don't want to add any new animations. All right, now on to the next part, clipping. So clipping is, there's 2 types of clipping. There's animation clipping, which I will again show my favorite example from our Swans in Love. Okay. This one actually I think I added. Oh man, this one was such a pain to do because it had a few things that was wrong with it. But essentially, the clipping animation is when you have, let's say, the animation come up all the way here, right? And I'm going to delete everything here for a second. Delete this. So let's see. Okay, so this is the clipping of the animation that I want to talk about real quick. You don't want to have a asset where the asset goes all the way through its runtime and then it ends up in a spot where it causes that sharp clipping or snapping to happen. You want to always transition the asset back to where it was, or you can keep it there, but you also need a continuant animation, meaning if I can stop my animation here. So think about a door function, right? A door function, it's opening and then it keeps opening, but you got to have an open state, a closed state. So same thing here for this specific asset. The animation was not being closed. It was just, this was it, right? So we had to go in and add, those other parts where the animation has to go back to where it was. So it's important that you do that. All right, so he's putting the food back. I know the animation doesn't make sense, but this was a last minute thing, so we had to add it in ourselves because we couldn't get a hold of the artist. But another thing here is you want to make sure your layer names are in Latin alphabet, meaning A, B, C, D, F, G, nothing scriptural, Arabic, Russian, Greek. Make sure, because the programming languages use the UTF-8, which is basically generic English alphabet, and programs are used to use that. So you want to make sure your layer names are that way. What happens if you don't is this. So you see how you get this like garbaged up function now, and then you'll have your nodes here, but the asset is broken because it wasn't able to properly assign because the characterizations didn't properly convert when you were transferring files or uploading, etc. Any questions so far on any of those topics? Okay, mirroring would be the easiest there. Bro, what about issues outside of builder boundaries, like one equipment asset from the current dropped asset? Yes, so that was the other clipping that I wanted to talk about. So I assume you mean like the sword, you're carrying a sword and the sword is running into the ground, right? And let me try to show that off for a second. that is also something that you want to watch out for. Um, there are assets on the marketplace that have issues, especially even the latest one too, and we those aren't as big of a problem as um, as some of these other things, because the game, it'll be nice to have, the animation of, let's say, the running with the sword. It's pointing the asset down, so you can't really go too far without it clipping into the ground. So you do want to make sure settings can be changed on the taskbar. What's going on? All right, I'll let this load in for a second. Yeah, settings. I think it's shift. Once you have the two languages, it's shift alt. Yeah, shift left, shift alt should switch your um, language. Not exactly, but rather the shadow body template showing in the marketplace, whereas no other equipment does. Oh yes. Okay, I see what you mean. That is a bug on the Sandbox side. So normally that was a bug that was when you unlocked an asset, and I'll show what that way Bjorn is talking about in just a second. So what Bjorn is talking about is, show it. So what Bjorn is talking about, guys, it will be on YouTube. Stop your propaganda, Tom. So what Bjorn is talking about is, in the new updated assets, there is a bug with Vox Editor for some reason that places the, like, a preview almost on the assets. So let's look at the sword, for example. You'll see there is a body, a shadow body, right? Normally when you uploaded it this way, um, yeah, no, it works. We tested every single one of them. Um, so normally the way it works, and even if it's not the case, Bjorn, what usually happens is everybody brings their asset pack together and gets reminted. But yeah, so this is not the case. So this is just the way VoxEdit does the preview. The asset should work or show. 0.8 does also have problems with animation. When you equip the asset, the idle animation does not show in 0.8. I think they're fixing that as well. Right. Okay. Cool. So that's the shadow thing. I don't know if everybody. Not. Yeah. See this, for example. This is from our friend Nobody. So this was an issue that would have usually not get approved, because the pivot point is not in the center. You'll see when the asset loads, it's loading off to the top. It means something's wrong with one of the nodes, that it's pushing this asset and centering it over here as if it's like that. The asset won't be a problem when you're wearing it, but it's just the way the dashboard site is rendering this asset. So the asset itself has no issues, but it's just the way it's rendering. So that is something that you want to make sure that I want to talk about. Let me load into the clipping thing to kind of wrap up that topic as well. 1 second. So let's do. How you guys been? I missed you guys. It's been a while. All right. So, for example, there's two assets that I think have this issue. Where it's not a big deal, but you want to make sure I think we'll open Raffetta's sword. I think this was one of them. This is a gorgeous sword, right? Where I think there's an issue with the centering here too. But this is a gorgeous sword where I can set this as a collectible, right? And then I'm gonna wear it. Press I, wear the NFT, and you'll see the asset looks fine, right? It's not clipping, and this is okay. But when you, let's say, run with it, right? There you go. So now you see the clipping. This is inevitable if you have such a long sword. It's not a big issue, but it's something you may want to consider for your asset, that some animations may cut directly into the floor. There was no strict rule set from the Sandbox side about it. That's why these assets are fine, but having a big sword, um, it's bound to clip down on there. And you can't really limit this because maybe the player character that I want to use is a giant, so it'll have more of a height, so that sword won't clip down. So it's having so much customizability in a software makes these kind of situations weird, but in this case, it's not a big issue. Alrighty, so let's go back into Vox Edit real quick. All right, so onto node count and face count. Here you can see this is an asset made by Oyman. Very beautiful asset, but the problem is it has barely, this is approved, by the way, so it's right under 5,000 faces, which is fine. And but you want to make sure you don't do that for all your game assets, right? You don't want to have 5,000 assets. Like one or two structures, it's fine. But if you have 5,000 faces for every single one of your art creations for your game, that computer will die pretty much. But here you'll see a lot of node count. Before we said node count really didn't matter. Now we're saying, you want to try to keep it under 175, 200 max, right? That's a lot of nodes, but that's what you need to do, right, to make it look like this. Another option is, assuming it's a structure, you can split up the asset into multiple parts so you have less nodes and less faces. But in the case of this NPC, it's not possible because there's animations happening, etc. Such beautiful assets made here. So another issue. So here I saw float, for example, idle float. I think it was minted this way, but ideally it should be, idle float if he wanted to do, or he could have done idle too, which is another way of naming this. So, and these are guys that have been in the creator fund. They've been doing this for a while, but it's easy to make, simple mistakes just because you're in the heat of the moment and you're making such amazing things, you forget some things. So trying to see if there's any clipping or z fighting. Everything looks good, or it's too fast to realize. So I'm sure there's probably some z fighting here right at this point, right? Or not, because it's not exactly meeting there, but um you want to make sure when you're looking at the asset there's no flickering, etc., with that z fighting. Now let's talk about closing animations. Closing animations. What can I open? There's a swans one that I opened. Let's go into the latest collection. Let's go back to DM Archer's kind of. Let's do another one. Actually, let's do the swamp boat. Okay. So here's a swamp boat, right? It has two animation, it has cruising, which goes up and down, right? And that's all it does. Essentially, um, the he didn't have to make it this long because it's a repeating animation. The same thing could have been achieved. Um, it really depends on which prop. Yeah. So the same thing probably could have been achieved, but he made it, rotate multiple times himself. He also has the rudders rotating. So, it's ultimately it's their choice, but he probably could have made the timeline shorter. Um, And so, yeah, so this has 2,000 faces with 146 nodes. It's a nice asset. Um, you want to make sure this wasn't an issue for this asset, but you want to make sure like you have your animations closed. So what does that mean? So here on the right side, you have that final animation. I'm going to remove it for a second. So you'll see the animations for the cruising, right, are going, it'll look fine in the box editor, but and it'll repeat. But in the game maker, this will give you a problem. So what you want to do is, whenever you have any type of node, you want to have a starting animation and a closing animation, and then what you can do is either just close it off by hitting this key here that creates new keyframes, or another thing you can do is whatever your final position is, it's usually the beginning position. You can left click control, scroll down all the way onto your beginning nodes. I accidentally selected this one. Not what I meant to do. Let's do that again. So select, right? And then scroll up, select copy, and then select your time zone to where you want it to be. Right, so 12 seconds, and I can do paste. And now I have exactly the same. It didn't work, actually. I tried it. Maxi. Clicking control and to deselect the node didn't deselect it for some reason when you do a drag select. It does work when you're doing single select like this, but it doesn't allow you to deselect. You got to do shift select. So control select to select multiple, shift select to deselect. So let's say if we selected this, control select doesn't allow you to deselect it, but if you do shift select, oops, let's do it again. If you do shift select, then it allows you to deselect it. Now, yeah, so you close up your animation, everything's good, but the problem is whenever you have any type of animation, even if it's 1 second, Sandbox will create a box around this asset. So it'll take the lowest point of the asset and make a box around this asset to the very top and to the edges. So just imagine an invisible box around this asset um, that Sandbox Game Maker creates because it has an animation. Now, let's say this wasn't an animated asset. Okay. What you want to do, if this was not an animated asset, you want to make sure you remove any animations. Okay. And then when you zoom in to the asset, you want to make sure you only have one keyframe. And I'll tell you why. When you have even 1 second of keyframe, it'll think that um, it's an animation. Doing it this way, this has now become a structure that the NPC can actually walk in and around. Having animation, it'll create that invisible box. Now you can use, collider things and create your own little collision boxes. But for static assets, you can have one keyframe, and that will allow you to walk on the asset and actually step onto these chairs, etc. Right? So there's no collision box that gets created with the animations. And then the animation name, again, I would just keep idle 101 for that non-animated assets. Okay. Talked about not changing. So propping shoes is another one that I wanted to talk about. Um, so this was another wearable. So this artist, I forgot, I think it was He Dong, also part of the Creative Fund, created this runner shoe with, I think it's rared with speed gems, and it looks great. Everything's fine. However, when he submitted it, he made the animation on this end, but he forgot to update it here. Right. So when we received the asset, it was pretty much like this. Right. So it was like broken up into, let's see, it was like that, right? So now you see it looks a little weird. Well, we go through a lot of the collections, Bjorn. So you'll see it looks fine, but when you mint it, right, you'll have this weird say here. So how can I fix this? A quick way to kind of fix this is you can actually just take either your ending position or your starting position. Again, you can do select all, right? You do select all, copy it, go to your T animation, select the very top, and then press paste. Now, what happens if you select on the second row and press paste? I guess it works. At one point, it wasn't working, but you can just, what I usually do is, yeah, it seems to be working. So when you have multiple errors, sometimes it positions the paste to where you clicked. So what I always do is I always select the very top to make sure that same layout animation is pasted exactly there. Right? Or you can duplicate the animation name. Well, you can't really create it because this is a locked asset, and just remove it. So those are some animation things. It doesn't have to animate under T. I don't think it should, technically. So yeah, so that's a quick piece to propping your shoes as well. Now, let's go over this one asset again. Let's see what else is there that we can kind of quickly talk about. Oh, someone asked about the Eiffel Tower. Let's take a look at this one. It has 260 nodes under 5,000 faces. So you see here the animation name is a title. So this structure has, no second animation. So you can technically hop on this edge and walk around it. Yeah, it's pretty big. It's a nice asset. There was the cyber sword. 3 elements was another one that I wanted to talk about. Where's the cyber? This one, I think. Yeah, okay. So also another thing to check is when you have these animations going on and forth, you want to make sure, let's say you're looping it back, but you also want to make sure sometimes your pieces are in the right spot. So let's say if you started animating before you completed your design, you can make a common mistake such as this, right? So I think this was the case for this one, where the animation looked like this, right? For the sword. See, it comes down, it creeps down oh so slightly, and you don't really notice it because you're done with your asset. It looks great in your eye, and it was a lot more subtle, but even if this is part of the design, it needs to come down and it needs to come back up to the starting point. So in this case, what you can do is select the position of where this was, just copy that keyframe, paste it here, and that should be good. Is the size limit of 512 voxels still important, or we can do some exceptions? So the size limit, from my understanding, is you can go as big as you want as long as the faces and the node counts matter. So, hologram, we kind of worked together with some of the assets that we did. You got to split up some of the assets, right? So if you have a massive asset, for example, the Eiffel Tower is fine, for example, but if you had an asset that was way bigger, ideally that should be fine. The size doesn't really matter or how you put it together. It's just the quality metric is you want to make sure your face count is low and your node count is low. Is it better to do multiple pieces for game? So this is a tough question because, Andy, depends. If it's your own game, yes, right? But if you're minting, let's say, a rocket ship, okay? Let's say you're minting a rocket ship that has multiple compartments. I actually have a great example for this. Hold on. So this was one asset before. Okay, let me show you the asset. So this was made by Meta 7. So this was one asset before. Okay, look at this. This was one asset. And it was one asset in the term that it was a fully closed off housing unit. So our recommendation was, in order to make this asset better, the design is great. We had to put it up as two assets. Okay, one which would make up the entrance and the outside, etc., and two that the part that like snaps in and allows you to add other, to make it bigger, so to speak, right? So in this case, we had to split up this asset, and you can rotate it. I forgot exactly what degree it was, but you can, I think it was this one right there. You can rotate it and snap it in, right? And position it. And then you can duplicate it and then do it again, right? And you can go, think of it like a soccer ball. So in this case, yeah, right? But when you're minting it, you want to make sure you think about the other person because they're only getting one piece of the pie. So pricing wise, you also want to make sure that if you're pricing it so that the person is able to get all of the pieces needed to make up that architecture, right? So here you can see I can use this as kind of like the building block to my sci-fi city and keep building around it. All right. And I can even go, I guess the way that designed, I have to eventually come a full circle. But if this was designed in a more like a, not like a pie, but more of a rectangular shape, then you could have used that. So yeah, so here's a great example where one single asset was broken down into two pieces, that one is the surrounding border, the other one is just the entrance and leaving. And you also want to leave enough room for these type of assets to have the camera, because the camera itself is another factor, right? You see right here, if I'm in a tight area, my camera is not going to be able to move because I'm in the corner. But let's say the center of the room, you want to be able to make sure you have enough space for the camera to travel. So um, people think the camera is like an invisible object. It's really not. It's a physical object um, that is basically moving around the character. So think about a bird just moving around your character and it's hitting these areas. Okay. And let's see, there's one other thing we can go over. I really wanted to do one more. Again, we're going to go back into the Swan one because that one had quite a few issues. I think it had all of these issues except for like node count, but mainly more animation and Z fighting. What am I looking for? January. There's the Moon Tree, which is a huge asset. I think the Moon Tree had clipping too, which was also by another creative fund artist. So, making these awesome looking things sometimes does cause issues. So, if you've seen my example with Mr. Nobody equipment, the reason why that happens is because you see here the center point of the asset is here, okay, but the artist started the animation to out on the outside of the pivot point. Okay, so what needs to happen is you want to make sure your animation is actually not here, right? So let's try to move this, right? You want to make sure, oops. What is happening? I know why it's doing that. Okay. Hmm. This is the new Matrix mode. Yada. Ooh. That's really strange. Okay. Anyway, what I was trying to say was you want to make sure your asset, your main, this is why you want to have control nodes as well. Another thing, right? So you have your world, your control node, so you can either take this and move it around like that. But ideally your control node should be in the center here, and then your animation should be centered to that piece. So here we'll move the position. You want to make sure this is at 0, right? And if you want it to where, let's say, the ducks' noses are here, or the swans, I'm sorry, not ducks. Make sure it's 0. Yeah, so to fix this, and there's other issues with this asset as well that I do want to also mention. So you want to start your animation with the center and end in the center of basically whatever you're doing. That way, that is the rotation point of the asset. I don't like swans. I like bears. Here, right, when we're selecting this body of asset, you can also see the issue here is that the pivot point of the asset is not where it should be ideally, right? You always want to have it centered. And the quick way to do that is you can right click here, you can set to center or set to floor, right? So in this case, I think we would want it to set to floor. And you'll see when you do that, it moves because based on the animation that was saved, it was saved based on the pivot point of of this corner, right? So you have to adjust your animation to fix that. So the best thing to do to avoid all this is to make sure you don't animate until you get your, your parent nodes in the right pivot points. Again, to show that pivot point here, you can manually adjust it. So like if it's going to be a door, it would make more sense to have a pivot point at the corner, right? Where the hinge is rotating, right? So let's do that. For example, let's put it back. So if this was a door and I wanted to kind of open the door, right? I would have my pivot point in the corner. But for this asset, it doesn't make sense because I want to rotate it in a center mass. So you can just right click, center it, because this is the primary asset. And then I'm sure these other assets have the same issue as well. So looking at this asset, like look at the pivot point, it's all the way out here, right? This is problematic. So you want to, again, either set it to floor or to center. Set it to floor and then save. So you see how, you see now when I select this asset, it's at the floor level, or I can set it to the center level, right? And second, yeah. And once I select it, it'll be in the center of the asset. So that way I can adjust it accordingly. And then when I rotate my main asset, right, it doesn't, it's actually in the center mass and not like somewhere off in the corner, right? So let's look at these ones real quick. Yeah, so this one, like the pivot point is all the way out here, right? So it's really important to set your pivot points properly. Alrighty. I think that covers a lot of the common mistakes and issues that people have with their assets. Let me know if you guys have any questions regarding any of that. Yeah, just make sure your assets are top notch in terms of these tips and tricks. You want to make sure your animations are closed, they're properly named. Yeah, and they're looping back. I'm trying to see if there's any other examples that I can show, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Do bears eat swans? I don't think so. I don't think they do. They do eat each other. They do eat each other. I think this was an interesting asset too. Was this the one? No, this isn't the one. There was another asset that I wanted to bring in. Oh, have you heard about not having empty? Yes. Thank you for bringing that up, Bjorn. So you want to make sure if you have any nodes, unless it's a controller node, meaning like it's a structural node, don't leave assets empty. So let's say if I'm let's say I'm here, right? And I front cover, which asset is this? It's over here, right? So let's do this asset. You don't want to leave assets like this. Okay, you don't want to have empty nodes here. I have seen there has been some issues. I don't exactly know what the issue that it causes, but we've been told to make sure that they don't have that. Sparky K said he had to. K said he had to work a lot of us due to empty nodes. Yeah, empty nodes is an important. Empty control nodes are an issue. I don't know. I don't think it's the case in terms because we did do a lot of assets, right? You can't really have empty control nodes without having like a I guess you could, right? I'm just trying to see if there's a good example. Hey, Otto Hill, welcome in. Yeah, I mean, ideally, if it's becoming an issue for people, try to do it. But like here, you can see we have structural nodes, right? Which is, this is the full car. It's a parent node to that front left wheel, and then this is the front axle, right? So it looks like he also has the whole axle in here. So he has the whole axle as a parent node. It works fine, not an issue. And then he separated the front left, and then he has the whole left wheel, right? Yeah, I think parent nodes should be fine. I think the main issue is having nodes, especially with like equipment, and that's probably this issue that K had as well, because I think we had that issue with one of his assets where, let's say you select here, right? So if he had this hip one, or let's say this heart 01 here, and he had this unlinked, so this causes issues, um, for some reason, but it doesn't cause an issue when it's over here. So he created like a blank. I wonder if that's his workaround to creating a blank box edit version. So that's interesting. But yeah, also another great asset that you can buy on the Sandstorm Marketplace. Support your favorite artists, guys. That being said, we're going to be doing another contest roundup for the March collection. And, make sure you get your assets ready and prepped. What I think we'll do this time around is allow some newcomers to join in on the fun. I haven't confirmed this with Slaterade, but ideally, we want to encourage other people to have assets in the marketplace. So I think one of the requirements we'll have is, um, that you were not part of the collection anytime, I don't know, within the past 6 months or something. Right. So yeah, so you can submit and it'll be fun. Let's see some of that there's a lot of new work out there. Check out the collection. There you go. Thank you so much, Tom. I was actually trying to open it as well from one end. This is not the right picture. Oh, that's because it's not part of the collection. So to go to the collection, what you can do is click shop, and you go to any of the collections that is not an avatar. So let's do this one. And then you can just simply change the number at the end of the URL to 60. And that will bring you to Sandstorm. Or it used to. They changed it. Damn it. Damn it. All right. So to find it, what you got to do is look for the Sandstorm logo or do control find Sandstorm, which is not showing up. They hit us. Slaterade, they hit us. Where is it? Where is it? I see it. There you go. So yeah, it's Sandstorm Builder highlights. Where's our account manager? So we got some new assets. I think Cynthia had some Z clipping too, which was addressed later on. But all in good. All minted and ready to go. Alrighty, guys. Look forward to. Oh, and make sure one more thing. Make sure when you unlock and relock your assets to do animations, especially on equipment, that you test them on the sandbox maker to make sure it's working. Because sometimes it'll look like it's working, but it won't. Alrighty. See, many rare items. Yeah, we're trying to stay away from the legendary just because it doesn't give too much value to builders. Epic, rare, and commons. The way we're kind of selecting it now is, if it's an asset that was kind of put together pretty quickly, not many animations, like a static figure, that's going to be a common. If the asset has work on it, it looks good, design is good, that's going to be a rare. And then epic's going to be one of those, like, if you're in the top three or it's a really great asset that people will enjoy, will be epic. And legendary has been causing us issues because artists only get one copy, and it's harder to sell. It does give more power for like equipment, but the pricing for it has to be really high, otherwise it doesn't make sense for the artist. So it's just better to have up to a pick, epic and rare. So we're gonna try to get more rare ones out as well for you guys. So yeah, so be on the lookout for that March collection. Anybody can join into the collection. And that's going to be at app.sandstorm.co. You will see. Oh, look at the Swans in Love by Trap Edition. You will see a collection for the marketplace similar to one over here. Yeah. And there was one person, I think Metatron, who didn't submit their asset. So that was not minted. So only 19 were minted. But yeah. So hope you guys, this is one of my favorite assets too by Nyan FT. Great work on that asset. Such a beautiful asset. I think that's one of the ones that I will definitely be buying. Um, Such a unique one, so simple too. So, alrighty, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you guys learned something, if anything. I know I always love interacting with you guys, and miss you guys, and hopefully see you guys soon. Thank you so much, and look forward to seeing what you guys will create. Thanks, everybody.